Greetings everyone and welcome to another episode of Fanfic Read Through. In these two chapters we will meet some background characters like Valerie Gray and Quan, together with some unnamed teachers because I didn't bother giving names to teachers other than Mr. Lancer and Tesla, which are the main teachers actually. There's a thing I wrote in the summary of this chapter, and it goes like this. Many compare school corridors to a battlefield. You have to dodge and avoid people. You can't always see attacks coming. When you don't have anyone to watch your back, it's even harder. I'm not okay with bullying, but it still happens today. And sometimes it's worse for other people. And teachers can't always see what's happening, even if it's happening right in front of them. It's up to us to stop it. With that said, please enjoy this chapter. Boiling Point, Chapter 3 and 4. Walking into the history classroom in the second period was like walking into the English classroom for the first period, noted Mr. Lancer. Just like in the first period, he picked up the box and threatened the students to take their phones and game consoles from them. When everyone had put away their things, Mr. Lancer picked up another pile of corrected tests he had gotten from his office during the break. I am less disappointed this time. The Second World War is a multifaceted conflict, but you all have understood the basic of the war, if not the US involvement in it. He began walking around the classroom again, pointing out the problems he had found in their understanding without pointing anyone out. Then he did pretty good, he thought, considering he had spent most of history class on the subject asleep or battling ghosts. He had crammed for the test the day before with Tucker and he was pretty sure he dozed off during the test. He agreed with the C+ Mr. Lancer had given him, but Dash didn't agree with his own grade and took it out on him. Then he started off ignoring Dash, doing his best to take notes as Mr. Lancer explained how the war affected other parts of the world. His temper growing as Dash did his best to get Danny's attention, throwing paper planes with small notes saying things like, "I'm gonna get you," and "Tell your girlfriend goodbye, you'll be dead soon," and drawings of dicks and other immature things. At the end of the class there wasn't only paper planes on the floor around Danny. He didn't bother getting out of the classroom before Dash this time. Instead he hung back, putting away his books in his backpack, steeling himself to go through the corridor to the chemistry classroom at the other end of the school. Sam and Tucker walked off to their own lessons in art and computer science, leaving Danny to fend for himself. "Meet you in the cafeteria after class," said Sam as she disappeared into the crowd. Like many, Danny saw the resemblance between a school corridor and a battlefield. If he tried to walk through the corridor like everyone else, he got a football in the head and someone hooked his crutches out from under him, and it was always the one pushing him so he fell to the floor. Had he been able to run, he would have done that. Had he been able to sneak or blend in with the rest of the students, he would have done that too, but he couldn't. Hating his injured body, Danny considered hiding and just flying to the classroom, but there was always the chance he'd be seen. Giving up trying to walk to the classroom, Danny put a wall against his back and waited, dodging footballs. The football team seemed to have designated him as target practice, having convinced the basketball team to join them by the time the bell rang. Some balls had connected with Danny, but he had chosen what part hit. The rest of the balls had bounced off the wall behind him. He apologized to the teacher as he hobbled into the classroom in the middle of his speech about the test results. He got attention before being told to take a seat. The only seat that was free was beside Valerie Gray. The girl moved her backpack from the seat and put it on the floor so Danny could sit on it. "What happened to you?" she asked in a hushed voice. Danny gave her a raised eyebrow. She reached up and picked out something small and white from his hair. Looking at it, Danny reached up and combed through his hair, making a face as more of the white pieces fell onto the desk and floor. "A razor," he said, surprised. Dash had thrown small pieces of his razor at him during history class. "What a waste," huffed Valerie, brushing away the razor pieces from the desk with a hand. "But that wasn't what I meant." She nodded at the crutches. Shrugging, Danny opened his chemistry book. "Some nutjob had a stab at me," he muttered, lowering his head as the teacher looked over at them. "What happened to you?" he asked when the teacher turned to another group of whispering students. She shrugged, adjusting the sling cradling her right arm, which, like Tucker's left, was in a cast. I did some heavy reading in the library last Friday. Danny tapped the empty page of his notebook, trying to listen to the teacher, but he found it much easier to think on what Valerie had meant by heavy reading. He knew she had been working all vacation, and the only time Valerie took time off work was when she was hunting ghosts, and considering that Danny Phantom hadn't been in town for the week, she had been the one hunting ghosts when they started trouble. Following that logic, Danny got a sour taste in his mouth. He was the one to blame for Valerie's injury. Mr. Fenton! Valerie jabbed Danny in the ribs with an elbow as the teacher tried to get Danny's attention. Glaring at Valerie, Danny turned to the teacher. "Sorry, I wasn't listening," he said, feeling every classmate's eye on him. "I noticed that, Mr. Fenton. This is an advanced class in chemistry. Are you sure you are in the right class?" asked the teacher, holding up a piece of white chalk and pointing to the blackboard where he had scribbled a chemistry formula. "I hope you did your homework over vacation." Looking at the blackboard, Danny smiled. Taking a piece of chalk, he hobbled up to the front of the classroom and filled in the answer before returning to his seat. The teacher never expected Danny to know the answer of his questions, ever since he had threatened to fail Danny in basic chemistry during the freshman year. The teacher was speechless for a moment, before he turned back to the class and continued as if he hadn't just stopped. "I never thought you were that good at chemistry," whispered Valerie, surprised as well. She had helped Danny study before the test, and knew he wasn't a genius like his parents. Smiling, Danny opened his chemistry book and showed her a page filled with his own scribbled notes. "How to make rocket fuel," he said, and Valerie understood. The short time she had dated him, she'd gotten to know him a bit better, and knew he dreamed about becoming an astronaut. What Valerie didn't know was that Danny hadn't chosen advanced chemistry because he thought it was fun to learn about rocket fuel, but because he had other plans. End of Chapter 3. Chapter 4. Having a lesson with only the teacher bullying him, Danny concentrated on the experiment that they were doing, and found it an interesting challenge. He had to do most of the experiment, Valerie being right-handed, could at the most hold things and give Danny orders to follow. She was the one to get the things they needed from the teacher, and ended up going back and forth between the desk and the teacher more than others. When the bell rang, they cleaned up their workspace, and Danny copied his notes for Valerie, handing her a paper with nicer handwriting than he used on his own notes. "You don't know how great it is of you to do this," she said, holding the door open for him. "It's nothing," smiled Danny, hopping out of the classroom before the teacher. "Go along!" shouted someone. Danny saw the ball flying straight for his face and flinched back, bumping into the chemistry teacher, whose hands were filled with books. The ball missed Danny's face by a hair, but the teacher fumbled the books and dropped them, hitting Danny's ankles. Swearing, the teacher turned to Danny. "Sorry," sighed Danny, and bent down to help pick up the books. "Watch where you're going next time," grumbled the teacher in more civil tone. Accepting the books, he walked off. "And so the battle continues," sighed Danny, catching a glimpse of Dash among the crowd. "Let me guess," said Valerie as he started walking. "Dash failed the English assignment you had?" "And the history test," added Danny, dodging a second ball flying for him. "I am so glad I'm not one of his friends anymore." Valerie had let Ash and Paulina know what she thought of their bullying before the end of the sophomore year. As a result, she had become more of an outcast among the people she had once called friends, and spent more time hanging out with Danny, Sam, and Tucker. Danny had considered telling Valerie about his secret, but he wasn't sure how she was going to take it, and Sam had talked him out of the idea. The cafeteria was filled with students. Like always, Danny could see the groups of people. There was the gamers who talked about nothing but their card games. The techno-geeks were all glued to their iPads or phones. The goths were dark and gloomy, as always a stark contrast to Paulina and Star, who sat with their friends, laughing loudly. He could see the basketball team sitting at the normal table, and noted that the football jockeys were coming in behind him. Standing in line for food, Danny wondered how he was going to carry the tray when he needed both hands to walk. He should have asked for a bag lunch from home before leaving that morning, but it had been the last thing on his mind. If Valerie's arm hadn't been hurt, he would have asked for help, even if it meant the football team would make fun of them. He moved the left crutch to his right hand. With the free hand, he picked the tray. "That will never work," said Valerie, balancing her tray in one hand. Before Danny could argue, 2 hands took the tray from him. "Here, let me help you," said Sam, stepping into the line in front of Danny. "You'll only drop everything if you try to jump around like that." "That's what I tried to tell him," said Valerie, greeting Sam. The two had grown closer as friends the last year. "Whoa, rough occasion?" asked Sam, seeing the other girls sailing. "Bookcase at the library," shrugged Valerie, putting food on her tray. "It wasn't fastened properly to the wall, and I was getting a book high up." Listening, Sam put food on Danny's tray, picking things she liked. Danny did his best to get Sam to put the things he wanted on the tray, but his words fell on deaf ears as the girls caught up. "You're missing the meat," protested Danny, seeing Sam jump the meatloaf altogether. "Look, Phantom can't even pick his own food," one of the football jockeys laughed from behind him. "What's the matter, Fantard? Not man enough to control your girlfriend?" taunted Dash from down the line. Muttering under his breath, Danny left the line and hobbled over to Tucker, who was guarding Sam's plate while eating his own meatloaf. All the while, the jockeys were throwing lame comments about his sexuality. "Don't people have anything better to talk about?" muttered Danny, sitting down and dumping his heavy bag on the floor beside him. His shoulders were aching from carrying around all his books, just to avoid having to go back to his locker between lessons. "If they know Sam, they wouldn't find it funny," said Tucker between a mouthful of food. Glaring at the group, Danny imagined what he could do to hurt them. He found himself wishing for an attack by the lunch lady, but no such luck. The only thing that happened was that the freshman got tripped up by Dash as he walked too close to the group. One small freeze ray, and they would be the ones on the ground. "Your parents invented a freeze ray?" asked Valerie. She and Sam had gotten over to them, and Danny had been too caught up in his own anger to notice them. "Yes, but it's not working," lied Danny, forcing the hot anger away from the forefront of his mind, accepting his tray from Sam. To his surprise, she had gotten back and picked some meatloaf for him. "Thanks," he said, really meaning it. "You're welcome." She gave him a mischievous smile in return, having intended all along to pick the meat for him, but finding the temptation to do some shenanigans irresistible. "Hey, Tucker, how did you hurt your arm?" asked Valerie, sitting down beside him. Tucker's eyes flickered towards Danny before turning to Valerie without a hint of anger in them. Danny felt like he was being slapped across the face by his best friend whenever he saw the small sign of hatred in Tucker's expression. Concentrating on his food, Danny kept quiet as his friend told Valerie a variant of the story they had told their parents. It sounded like they had stumbled into a fight during their trip to Chicago. Whenever Valerie tried to get more details from them, they started asking about what happened in Emmett Park when they were gone. Valerie's answers were vague at some point, but very detailed when she told them about the party Dash had thrown together during the weekend. Thinking that he might get through lunch without any more attacks from Dash and his friends, Danny lowered his guard and didn't see the football flying towards him before it hit the tray, splashing whatever was left of his food all over the table and Danny. They all could hear the laughing coming from Dash and his friends. Paulina was the first one to pick up her phone. "This is going on Facebook," she said loudly for everyone to hear. Picking up his backpack, Danny rose. "See you in math," he muttered to his friend, a murderous look in his eyes as he left. "Is it just me, or is Danny much more emotional than usual?" asked Valerie, picking food out of her hair. "No," said Tucker, wiping his glasses on his shirt. Sam didn't say anything. She was following Danny with her eyes. Valerie might have a point, she thought. The last time she'd seen Danny's mood swing faster than the blink of an eye, he had accidentally gotten weather powers from Vortex. Did the Ripper Ghost do something to him? She wondered. End of chapter 4.